Well, blessed Christmas Day. If you are joining us for the first time today, that's great. Thank you for joining us. But just want to let you know that this is part of the third part of a 3-day reflection from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we are in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 20, and we're going to be on 15 through 20 today. And this is 3 parts on what is essentially the Christmas story. Now, as the weeks go on, we'll be kind of hearing a little bit more of this story, and we'll hopefully try to get back into our study of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book, which we're almost done with. But I'm taking some time to focus on the story that brings us together, the story of Jesus' birth. First of all, we've already heard 2 groups of people who are involved in Jesus' birth. One were Mary and Joseph, who are doing their civic duty, not something exciting, their civic duty of being registered. Oh, that sounds exciting, doesn't it? To be registered because the government told you to come and be registered here. And guess what? It was so crowded there wasn't any room for anything, so you had to sleep with the animals. There were a lot of reasons why Mary and Joseph would have probably wanted to stay home, let alone that Mary was about ready to give birth. But yet they were obedient and did and expected God to do something. They didn't know what, but they were obedient. And then you have shepherds who are on the night shift. Shepherds who are usually not considered the most savory type of people in their society, but were faithful on their night shift, hoping that no wolves would show up, and that it's time for them to watch the sheep and the lambs. But guess what? God interrupted. The angels interrupted. And they were privy to the greatest show on earth, even as they were the most unlikely viewers of it. This happened in the hills above Bethlehem. It didn't happen in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem, although it was the birthplace of David, it was not considered the center of the universe. Jerusalem would be more of a candidate. But yet it is in these out-of-way places that God chooses to show up. And so we finish our story today with Luke chapter 2, beginning with verse 15. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, that the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in a manger. And they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all that they heard and seen, as it had been told them. Now, you have 2 very unlikely people meeting each other. Shepherds and Mary and Joseph. They are not together at the beginning, but are brought together by the message. The message that Jesus is born. Jesus, God incarnate, is born this day. And to some extent, this is a foretaste of what God does. God brings together people who normally are not brought together. As you have heard me say before, Mary is kind of a focus where she treasures and ponders these things. And the word ponders really should mean more like process these things. There are so many and various events that have come together, and Luke is very specific about Mary pondering things, and that means bringing desperate things, different things together. Sometimes that happens, especially in big events like births. I was thinking about the time when each one of my kids were born. Sometimes it's a whirlwind, and then at the end, when you have the child in your arms, you just realized all the things that have happened in the past 48 to 72 hours And he realized there was a lot of things that happened. And he had to sit and put them together. That's what Jesus does, is he interrupts our everyday schedules, even our mundane schedules, and wants to bring people together. And the thing that brought them together is a consistency about this message. Mary had already been visited by an angel about the miraculousness of this child. Joseph, as we heard last Sunday, has already been interrupted in his life and was not afraid to take Mary as his wife, although he could have put her away because she was found with child during the engagement season. And let alone shepherds, not any of the rulers of Bethlehem, not even any of the rulers of Judea. We haven't had the arrival of the wise men. That's a whole other story that we'll reflect on later. But all of these people come together and have a very consistent message that this child who there is no room in the inn for, this child who was not born in a castle or in a palace, this child born in a feeding trough is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They couldn't see it yet. I know the shepherds had the miraculous vision of the angels that showed them the place where this would take place, and I hope they weren't disappointed when they got there. I'm sure there was some excitement that, yeah, what this great event told us has actually happened. But you think about the event itself. It's a family that didn't even have room for a hotel room, and they're found with a child in a animal trough. Why is this any more special than any other birth that happens in a faraway place where there's no room for people? But it was because it was told to them by God. And remember at the beginning when I said that God doesn't necessarily show up in the miraculous, but shows up in the everyday things. And the next days for Mary and Joseph will be everyday things. Now that they have a child in their arms, they have to wait 8 days to get the child circumcised. And we'll be here on New Year's Day for the naming and the circumcision of Jesus. That's why we celebrate New Year's. It's not that exciting when you think about it. It's a medical procedure and a naming ceremony. There wasn't a lot of hoopla on that day. It was just the thing that was expected. And then they had to wait another 40 days for Mary to be purified so that Mary and Joseph could go together to the temple and offer their sacrifice. Now they are visited by a prophet and prophetess, Simeon and Anna, but it's still mundane things. And in the middle of those mundane, everyday things or necessary things, God still shows up. God still tells them that there's more to life than just these things. And isn't that a message for us today? God shows up. My friends, let us remember that today. Let us remember that in the mundaneness of another Christmas, another New Year's, another weekend, another whatever, wherever you find yourself. Or maybe for some of us, another snowstorm that has prevented us from doing the Christmas things that we should be doing. It is in that God shows up. And it's the greatest news of all. Take care. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow. And we continue to say, stay safe, but more importantly, come to the child that you may see Jesus is here. Amen.